He arrived in the world to the sound of water, not a hospital sink or a clean kettle singing, but the slow rush of the Rio das Velhas, rolling beneath a concrete bridge outside Santa Lucia, Minas Gerais. It was late August 1996, a damp morning after a night of heavy rain. Beneath the bridge, tucked inside a grocery store box that once held bananas and now cradled a blanket scissored from an old t-shirt, a newborn boy hiccuped, cried, and fell quiet again, as if even his lungs were learning to be careful. On the riverbank, a man in rubber sandals picked his way through the sedge. Sebastião Alves, known to everyone as Tião, carried a rusted fishing pail and a patience worn thin by life. He was nearing 40, with a back curved like a question mark and hands that remembered every nail he had hammered across 20 years of day labor. The rain had kept him awake, and the river's lowered belly, greedy and brown, promised catfish. What he did not expect to catch was a life. He heard the cry first, a thread of sound easily mistaken for a gull. Then he saw the box. Cardboard softened by rain, top folded but not sealed, a corner darkened where water had kissed it too long. He knelt, heart thudding with an unfamiliar panic. "Meu Deus," he whispered, crossing himself the way his mother had taught him. Inside, a baby lay with a wristband of blue yarn and a paper pinned to the cloth. The paper was damp but legible. "Forgive me. Please take care of him." No name, no date. Just a request that was also a command, and a command that would become a life sentence, though not the kind anyone would later accuse him of. He gathered the baby, box and all, and stood under the bridge's belly to shield him from the fine mist. The boy's eyes were closed, his mouth the shape of a small O, like a coin slot ready for luck. "Você é teimoso, hein?" Tião murmured, surprised by the tenderness in his voice. "You chose the river and me." The town stirred awake above them. Roosters, buses, the bell of Nossa Senhora do Carmo. Tião had no idea whom to tell first. The police? The church? Dona Lourdes at the bakery, who knew every whisper before it formed. He imagined the looks, the questions, the word orphan hanging in the air like laundry that would never dry. He walked to his sister's house instead. Ana Paula lived 2 streets from the river, a narrow home where geraniums paraded on a windowsill. She opened the door in a housecoat, wet hair clipped back, and stared at the bundle in his arms. "Nossa Senhora, Tião, what did you do?" "What I found," he said, "and what I think God put in my path." Ana Paula didn't argue. She warmed water, found a bottle, and coaxed tiny swallows into the boy's mouth. By noon, the baby slept in a drawer padded with towels. By 2, half the street knew. By sunset, the police had come and gone, asking the questions that would later be asked 1,000 times more. Were there witnesses? Any clue? Did he see footprints in the mud? Tião signed a statement with a cramped signature and a hand that shook. The next day, he climbed the steps of the church and spoke to Father Elias. The priest listened in a hush that felt like shelter, then led him to the rectory office and drew a breath that carried both caution and hope. "If no mother appears," the priest said, eyes searching Tião's face, "and if social services allows it, you could foster. Perhaps adopt." "Me?" Tião echoed, as if someone had slipped the word into his pocket when he wasn't looking. He lived in a rented room behind the mechanic's shop where he changed oil and bled brakes. He owned 2 cooking pots and a patch of sky. But he also had something he had never named because he had never needed to, a hunger to stand between something fragile and the next storm. The legal steps were slow, bureaucratic, and confusing, but in the way of small towns, neighbors appeared with casseroles and clothes, advice and opinions. "What do you think? Should he have turned the baby over immediately, no questions asked? Or was bringing him home first the only human thing to do?" As the weeks passed, forms were filled, interviews conducted, pockets emptied. The drawer became a crib. The boy's name, when it came to him one night like a sparrow landing, was Mateus. On Mateus's first festa junina, Ana Paula painted a faint mustache on his lip and tied a straw hat under his chin. At Christmas, a neighbor crocheted a blanket with a blue border, echo of the yarn that had circled his wrist. Tião learned to boil papaya to ease a cough, to sing off-key lullabies, to dread the sudden silence in a house that told him a toddler had found something to climb. Yet even in the soft, ordinary days, a question camped in the corner of the room, refusing to leave. Who had left him, and why? If love was a door, had it closed or had it been closed upon someone? Tiao kept the damp note pressed in a Bible, a felt bookmark holding the memory of rain. He promised himself he would tell Mateus everything one day. He also promised himself that day would wait, until the boy was taller, or stronger, or the world gentler. The river continued, thick with catfish and secrets. And as Mateus learned to walk, talk, run, and laugh, the weight of the unspoken grew with him, until a single knock on a door, years later, would rearrange their fates in a way neither of them could have imagined. If this opening gripped you, tap like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments. What would you have done if you found a baby under a bridge? Mateus grew up with the bridge in his shadow, though he never knew it. To him, the world began in Tiao's arms and expanded outward. Cobbled streets of Santa Lucia, the marketplace smells of fried pastel and roasted corn, the church bells marking time like a patient clock. Children teased him sometimes, whispering words he didn't fully understand. Bridge boy, Kaisha. But Tiao's voice always drowned the cruelty. You're mine. That's enough. By the age of 10, Mateus was taller than most boys his age, with wiry legs and eyes the color of brewed coffee. He ran barefoot through the alleys, carried groceries for neighbors, and found wonder in small things. How fireflies glowed like fallen stars. How his adopted uncle's accordion sang sadness and joy in the same breath. When classmates mocked his patched clothes, Mateus stood straighter. Pride, Tiao taught him, wasn't in what you wore, but in how you walked. Yet childhood wasn't without shadows. Once, during a town fair, Mateus overheard two women at a stall. Poor boy, one said, shaking her head. At least Tiao had the heart to raise him, replied the other. Mateus pretended not to hear, but that night he asked, Pai, why do people call me poor boy? Tiao's spoon paused midair. He cleared his throat, then set it down. People like to talk, Filho. Doesn't mean they know the truth. The truth is you are rich with love, and that's more than most can say. Mateus accepted the answer, though he noticed how Tiao's gaze lingered on the Bible afterward, as if the faded note inside were whispering louder. In school, Mateus excelled at reading. He devoured books about explorers, inventors, revolutionaries. Tiao, who had never finished elementary school, marveled at his son's hunger for knowledge. One day, he told Ana Paula proudly, Mateus will leave Santa Lucia. He'll be more than a mechanic like me. As adolescence arrived, so did restlessness. Mateus dreamed of Belo Horizonte's tall buildings, of universities, of a world where nobody would call him Bridge Boy. He worked after school at the same mechanic's shop where Tiao spent his days, stacking tires and changing oil, saving coins in a jar beneath his bed. Every night when the jar grew heavier, so did the questions that lived in his chest. One evening, while helping Tiao close the shop, Mateus asked suddenly, Pai, do we have other family? Grandparents? Aunts? Someone out there? The wrench slipped from Tiao's hand. The metallic clang echoed in the silence before he forced a smile. Your family is right here, Philo. Me, your tia Ana, the neighbors who love you, that's all that matters. But the way his father's eyes clouded told Mateus there was more. Something unsaid. By 17, Mateus was determined to change his fate. He applied for a scholarship at a technical school in Belo Horizonte, and to his astonishment, was accepted. The night the letter arrived, he ran home shouting, holding the envelope high like a trophy. Tiao hugged him so tightly Mateus could hardly breathe. Yet, behind the joy, fear curled in Tiao's stomach. Distance meant independence. Independence meant questions. The first months in the city were overwhelming. Mateus studied engineering, worked part-time at a bookstore, and wrote letters home every Sunday. Pai, I miss your beans and rice, one letter said. Here, everything tastes rushed. Another said, I saw a baby in the park today. For some reason, I thought of you. Though Mateus adapted quickly, a sense of incompleteness followed him like a shadow. During late-night study sessions, when exhaustion blurred the numbers on the page, he sometimes wondered who had given him his eyes, his laugh, the stubborn streak that made him push harder when others gave up. One rainy afternoon, while sorting through a box of his childhood things that Tio had sent with him, Mateus found a folded piece of cloth. Inside it, a faint blue yarn string, worn, frayed, and tied in a tiny loop. He turned it over in his hands, puzzled. Why would Tiao keep something so small, so old? The thought nagged at him, though he didn't dare ask. At least not yet. Because as much as Mateus longed for answers, he also feared them. And what he didn't know was that back in Santa Lucia, Tiao was growing more restless by the day, debating whether to finally reveal the truth he had carried alone for 29 years. But the truth, once spoken, would change everything. The silence between father and son had always been filled with laughter, work, and simple routines. But now, distance had stretched that silence, making it sharper, louder. Every time Mateus visited Santa Lucia, he returned taller, more confident, and with new questions hidden in his eyes. One evening during a holiday visit, Mateus sat on the porch while rain tapped on the tin roof. He watched Tiao mend a fishing net, his hands moving with muscle memory. "Pai," Mateus said quietly, "do you ever wonder why I look nothing like you?" Tiao's fingers froze on the net. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he looked out toward the river, swollen and restless, as if searching for a response in the water itself. Finally, he forced a chuckle. "You think too much, Filho. Some families look alike, some don't. What matters is who stays." Mateus let the subject drop, but doubt grew like roots underground. Back in Belo Horizonte, he began researching adoption laws, reading stories of abandoned children, even visiting the city library archives. Each article about infants, left in doorways or hospitals, pulled at him. Could his own life have started that way? Yet every time he tried to ask Tiao directly, something in his father's tired, kind eyes stopped him. Meanwhile, Tiao wrestled with the weight of the secret. Nights stretched long. The damp note in his Bible became heavier than stone. He remembered the tiny box, the wet cardboard, the words scrawled by a desperate hand. "Forgive me. Please take care of him." How many times had he reread those lines, trying to imagine the woman who wrote them? Was she young? Frightened? Did she cry as she walked away? Ana Paula noticed the change. "You can't carry this forever, Hermo," she told him one afternoon while shelling beans at her kitchen table. "He's not a boy anymore. He deserves the truth." "But what if the truth makes him hate me?" Tiao whispered. Ana Paula shook her head. "He won't. You gave him life twice. First when you found him, then every day you raised him. Don't you see? That's real fatherhood." Still, fear kept Tiao silent. Until one autumn day, when life forced his hand. Mateus was 29, finishing his master's degree, when he received a call. Tiao had collapsed at work. The doctor said it was exhaustion, perhaps worsened by years of labor. Nothing fatal, but serious enough to keep him in the hospital for several nights. When Mateus arrived, he found his father thinner, weaker, but still with that stubborn half-smile. He pulled a chair close. "You scared me, Pai," Mateus said, voice tight. "You can't just leave me like that." Tiao looked at him for a long time, eyes shining with something heavier than illness. "Filho," he said, voice rough, "there's something I need to tell you before I don't get another chance." As Mateus's heart thudded, he leaned in, waiting. Tiao's hands trembled as he reached for his bag, pulled out a worn Bible, and opened to the page with the felt bookmark. There, pressed flat, lay the old note, stained and fragile. He handed it to Mateus. Mateus read the words once, twice, 3 times. "Forgive me. Please take care of him." He looked up, his mouth dry. "What is this?" Tiao swallowed hard. His voice broke. "It's how I found you, under the bridge, in a box, 29 years ago." The room seemed to tilt. Mateus gripped the note as if it were burning his hands. Images flashed in his mind, whispers in the town, the blue yarn string, every half-answer Tiao had ever given. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he asked, his voice shaking between anger and hurt. "Because I was afraid," Tiao admitted, tears tracing his cheeks. "Afraid you'd see me not as your father, but as the man who kept you from your blood. I thought love would be enough. Maybe it was selfish. But I couldn't risk losing you." Mateus sat back stunned, torn between gratitude and betrayal. His entire life had been rewritten in a single moment. The monitors beeped steadily, indifferent to the storm inside him. For the first time, he wasn't sure who he was, or where he truly belonged. And outside the hospital window, the river rolled on, as if it had been waiting 29 years for this truth to finally surface. For days after the revelation, Mateus walked as if his feet no longer belonged to the earth. The note, fragile and yellowed, burned in his pocket. He read it again and again, searching for clues in the shaky handwriting, gender, age, a hesitation in the letters that might whisper something of the woman who left him. But the note gave nothing more. Only sorrow. Only silence. He confronted Ana Paula first. Sitting at her kitchen table where he had eaten countless bowls of caldo de feijão as a boy, Mateus laid the note down. "Did you know?" Ana Paula's eyes filled. "I did, from the beginning. But I respected your father's choice. He loved you too much to let that truth steal your peace." "Peace?" Mateus's voice cracked. "You all let me build a life on lies." Ana Paula reached across the table, her hands warm on his. "It wasn't lies. It was love. You were never abandoned in spirit, because Tião chose you. Every single day." But Mateus couldn't quiet the storm in his chest. He returned to Belo Horizonte restless, unable to focus on classes, work, even friends. Nights became long battles with questions. Who left me? Why? Am I someone's shame? Or someone's secret grief? His search began clumsily. First, he scoured local records of abandoned children from 1996 but found nothing specific. Then he visited the municipal office in Santa Lucia, asking if any police reports matched his story. One officer, older now, remembered vaguely. "Yes, I recall. A baby found near the Rio das Velhas. No witnesses, no leads. We thought the mother must have been desperate." The word desperate clung to Mateus's skin like humidity. He began visiting the bridge whenever he returned home. He would stand on the bank, watching the water move, always moving, never keeping what touched it. Was his mother out there somewhere, walking among strangers, carrying a secret too heavy to name? Meanwhile, Tião struggled with the aftermath of his confession. Though relieved the secret was no longer locked inside him, he feared every glance from Mateus was now different, colder. Yet in quiet moments he still cooked Mateus's favorite feijão tropeiro, still asked about his studies, still watched him with the same awe as the day he first held him. One evening Mateus finally voiced what had been festering. "You should have told me earlier, Pai. I had the right to know." Tião nodded, eyes lowered. "I know, and I'm sorry, but I swear to you, if I had to choose again, I'd still take you from that riverbank. I'd still be your father." The sincerity in his voice cracked something inside Mateus. He realized his anger wasn't against Tião. It was against a ghost he couldn't find, against absence itself. Weeks later, Mateus made a decision. If he couldn't find his biological mother, he would at least honor the man who raised him. At a university event, when asked to give a speech about resilience, Mateus told his story. Not all of it, but enough. "My father taught me that family isn't where you start but who stands beside you," he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. The audience rose in applause. Tião, sitting in the back, wept openly, unashamed. Still, the bridge continued to call Mateus. On his 29th birthday, he walked there alone at dawn. The cardboard box was long gone, the river unchanged. He held the blue yarn string in his hand, then tied it carefully to the bridge's railing, a gesture not of anger but of release. As the water shimmered below, Mateus whispered, "Whoever you are, I forgive you." It was not the end of his questions, but it was the beginning of peace. And as the sun rose, he realized something powerful. Sometimes the family you seek is already the family you have. Months after tying the yarn to the bridge, Mateus found himself living with a new kind of balance. The questions about his origins hadn't vanished, but they no longer consumed him. Instead, they became part of his story, like chapters of a book he might never finish reading, but one he could still cherish. Tião recovered slowly from his health scare, though he never fully regained the strength of his younger years. The mechanic's shop eventually became Mateus's responsibility. He worked there on weekends, not because he needed the money. By then, he had a stable job in engineering, but because it was the place that had shaped both of them. The shop smelled of oil and dust, but also of loyalty, sacrifice, and the steady heartbeat of a man who had chosen to be a father. One Sunday afternoon, as they closed the garage, Tião placed a hand on Mateus's shoulder. "I don't know if I'll live to see you with children of your own," he said softly, "but I want you to remember this. Being a parent is not about blood. It's about choosing to stay. Every day. No matter what." Mateus nodded, his throat tight. For years he had wondered whether his story began with abandonment. But standing there, covered in grease, beside the man who had raised him, he realized his story truly began with rescue. Later that year, Mateus returned to the university for a lecture. He told his full story for the first time, about the box, the note, the silence, and the truth, revealed 29 years later. As he spoke, the auditorium hushed. Some listeners cried quietly, others nodded, as if recognizing their own wounds in his words. He ended with a question, the same one he often carried in his heart. Is family defined by blood or by love? I know my answer. What's yours? The response was overwhelming. Dozens of people came forward afterward, sharing their own stories of adoption, abandonment, and resilience. Mateus realized then that his pain had become his gift. By speaking, he allowed others to heal. At home, Tião listened to a recording of the lecture, tears glistening in his weathered eyes. "That's my boy," he whispered. "That's my son." On his 30th birthday, Mateus and Tião returned to the bridge together. The river carried the same slow rhythm it had the morning of his discovery. This time, Mateus didn't come searching for answers. He came to give thanks. He placed flowers on the bank, not for the mother who left him, but for the man who found him. Then he turned to Tião, embraced him, and said, "You didn't just save my life. You gave it meaning." The old man's arms wrapped tightly around him, their shadows merging in the morning light. And so the story that began in silence under a bridge ended not with loss, but with love. A reminder that sometimes the greatest families are not the ones we are born into, but the ones we are chosen by. Family is not written in blood or paper, but in the daily act of staying, protecting, and loving. Sometimes, the deepest wounds lead us to the strongest bonds. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Would you consider the person who raised you your real parent, even without blood ties? And make sure to subscribe for more stories like this one.